Hey everybody, welcome back to Every Movie Ever. I am, of course, Eric Houston, and I am still trying to review every movie ever made. Hanging out on the dock today in honor of a movie I quite enjoy that we'll be talking about later in the show, and that's Cabin Boy. But before we get to Cabin Boy, I want to start today with The Horn Blows at Midnight. This is a Jack Benny movie that I caught on Turner Classic recently. I'm a big Jack Benny fan, and so I'm always interested to see his movie output. His film roles aren't really what he's known for. He's much more known for especially his radio show, which later became a television show, and the egotistical cheapskate character that he built up in that. I'm a huge fan, so I was excited to check this out, and this is a weird one, especially when you consider that this is a movie from like the 40s. Jack Benny plays an angel who is dispatched to Earth to blow a trumpet that will end civilization. It will start the apocalypse. When he gets down there, there's already two angels living down there on Earth who don't want the world to end, so they steal the trumpet from Jack, and then another angel has to come back down to help him get the trumpet back. And this is a comedy, by the way. Oh, and P.S., the whole thing is a dream that a session trumpeter is having. It's super weird. I don't know if it works. I don't think that it does, but there's some charming pieces in it. Jack is fun to watch. He's not really playing his Jack Benny character in this, but it's still a fun performance and a decent enough time at the movies. 3 stars. A little more in Jack's wheelhouse, though, was Buck Benny Rides Again, which came out during the height of his radio program and was sort of an attempt to do the radio show on the big screen. And so it's a story about, it's a kind of a complicated story because the weird thing about Jack Benny's radio show is in the show he played himself, and the show always revolved around his getting ready to do his radio show. So it was a little bit like The Muppet Show, where there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on. And in this one, Jack is Jack, and he gets, because he's trying to romance a lady singer, he sort of gets dared into going out west to this dude ranch and pretending to be a cowboy, even though he's not a good cowboy at all. It's fun in this one especially to see Jack's radio co-stars. All too briefly, we get to see Mary Livingston, who is his real-life wife, but we get a lot of Rochester, who played his valet. Rochester has some excellent pieces in this, and especially a great dance number that Rochester gets to do. We also get to spend some time with Phil Harris and with Dennis Dennis O'Day, I think his name is. He was the singer on the Jack Benny program. It's a fun movie. We get to see Jack playing his cheapskate character. We get to see some hallmarks of the radio show, like Jack's beat-up old car. It's a fun time, but it lags in a lot of places, so I'm going to give it 3 stars. Let's stick on this black and white trend and talk about Inherit the Wind. This is the classic movie based on a stage play that is based on the real-life Scopes monkey trial. So this is pretty much the whole Scopes monkey trial, but the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So the whole idea is that it's a small town, and a teacher, played by bewitched Dick York, has been put on trial for teaching evolution. He's defended by Spencer Tracy. Frederick March is the prosecutor. You got a bunch of great old-time faces in this. You've also got, I can't remember his name right now, but the guy who was in MASH and was Joe Friday's sidekick on Dragnet in the 60s, Henry Morgan. Henry Morgan is the judge. This is a real strong movie. It's got a great, thoughtful center. Gene Kelly is also in this movie in kind of a weird role, atypical. Not Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire is in the movie, and what's a very atypical Fred Astaire role as this newspaper reporter. But like I say, it's a movie that has, it's a really, thoughtful movie. It has some moments of camp to it, but it's still a really strong and powerful movie. 4 stars. I think there's a little fish down there. But now I want to talk about I Confess. I Confess is a classic Hitchcock picture. This is the one where a dude has confessed to a priest that he committed murder, but the priest can't say anything because it was in the confessional. But then the priest becomes suspected of the murder, and the whole thing is really from the priest's point of view. I had never seen this movie. A priest tried to show it to us in school, and we didn't pay any attention to it. I'm a big Hitchcock fan, so it was about time I felt like that I got around to this one. And to be honest, it's okay. It's a real middling Hitchcock effort, which isn't to say that it's bad, certainly not, but it's just not, it's not that sort of great Hitchcock movie that you would hope for it to be. I think I'm going to have to give this one 3 stars. Happy Hour is a real weird 80s picture that I caught on, there's a streaming channel that's on like cable and on some video services like Vudu called Impact. And Impact is great. It has a bunch of real weird movies, mostly from the MGM library. I like to check it out, look for weird stuff. One of these movies was called Happy Hour. I guess it has an alternate title, which is Sour Grapes, which I think it's better known as. But Happy Hour is a movie about a guy who invents a beer that is super addictive. And then there's a bunch of shenanigans around different companies trying to get the secret recipe, and also little vignettes of people who are super addicted to this beer and like stores price gouging it. And then there's a weird secret agent plot where Rich Little, of all people, plays a secret agent trying to get a hold of the recipe. It is not a particularly good movie. I was really with it for about the first half hour, and then it really started to drag. It was sort of delightfully weird for a while, and then it just kind of got long in the tooth, and then like the very end, the very last couple of lines are a return to greatness. It's a very uneven movie. It's a very strange movie. It suffers, I think, from that it doesn't ever stick with one character. It doesn't follow one character and the things that they're doing. It kind of dances all around and flirts with all of these characters, but not in a satisfying way. You've got a couple of, outside of Rich Little, Jamie Farr is in this thing in I guess my favorite subplot, where he's a private detective and his cool lady secretary / sidekick are out there trying to get a hold of the recipe too, and she was my favorite character in the whole thing. But overall, it just doesn't work. I can only give it 2 stars. Speaking of comedies that don't quite work, let's talk about How I Got Into College. This is a lesser-known film from Savage Steve Holland, who you might know from directing Better Off Dead and Say Anything. This is a movie I watched for the show my brother and I do called Bad Movie Brothers, so I knew going into it, it was not going to be a great movie. Incidentally, check out Bad Movie Brothers for a much longer review of this movie. This movie, it's a very middling movie. It is right in the middle there. There's some stuff that charmed me, and there's a lot about it that's sort of long and drawn out and doesn't quite work. It's a comedy about a couple of high schoolers trying to get into college. There are some great zany moments, but not enough of them. But the stuff that's there is inspired. I would just like more. That's why I'm giving it 2 stars. So like I said, we're here on the dock, we're hanging around the ocean, the sea, which is mighty yar today, because I recently rewatched Cabin Boy, which is a favorite movie of mine. Well, favorite, stretching it. It's a movie that I have a fondness for. This is, of course, Chris Elliott's attempt to become a big screen picture star, and nobody wanted it when it came out. It's since gained a kind of a cult status that I think is deserved. There's a wonderful, very small turn from Andy Richter in this, who is happy to show you how a harem girl dances. There is a, to me, almost legendary cameo by David Letterman as a sock monkey seller in this. It's the story of Chris Elliott, who is a fancy lad who boards the wrong boat and ends up going on a series of kind of grubby misadventures to become, to finally become a man, as it were. Chris is funny. The cast is funny. Again, a little long in the tooth. Interestingly, this movie was supposed to be made by Tim Burton, but Burton backed out at the last minute. You can still see Burton's influences kind of around the edges. It's a fun movie, if not one that really works all the way. So even though I am celebrating it by being out in the salty sea air, I can only give Cabin Boy 2.5 stars. Speaking of Tim Burton, a movie he did make fairly recently, actually, is Big Eyes. This is the true-to-life story about that lady that painted those paintings in like the 60s and 70s of the kids with the really big eyes. Amy Adams plays the lady that paints the pictures. I forget her name. I just forget her name. I had it for a second and it's gone. And Christoph Waltz plays her husband, who for years and years and years tries to take credit for the paintings until Amy Adams becomes sick of it and they go to court over it. It is a good-ish movie. It was nice to see Tim Burton doing a more personal project again, as opposed to all these like weird Hollywood remakes he keeps doing for whatever reason. It's not 100% successful, in part because it's so by the numbers and predictable. It was a movie that I think was missing a particular perspective. Maybe if they had spent more time on the court case aspect of it, that might have been more fun, but it was just missing something that could have really kicked it up a couple of notches. As it is, though, it's a fine movie with some fine performances, and it's interesting enough. It is a good kind of folding laundry kind of a movie. 2.5 stars. Speaking of Tim Burton, let's talk about his most recent movie, at least up to the time that we're recording this, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This is a movie where I can't tell you what happens in this movie. This movie doesn't make any sense. It's a movie that seems like it's going to be Tim Burton's X-Men, sort of, where it's about a bunch of spooky orphans who have variously kind of spooky superpowers. Like there's a girl who floats, and there's like twins that can like eat anything, and there's a really creepy kid that can like animate dolls and things by putting little hearts in them, and I think he like coughs the hearts up or something. I don't know. There's a very, very complicated mythology to this thing, and they cram it all into this one movie so that the entire movie feels like exposition. You never really get to know the characters. You never really get to do anything fun. It just seems like people are explaining things to you for an hour and a half. It seemed like it might be a chance for Tim Burton to do something suitably Burton-y in a sort of, you know, Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands-y kind of a way, but it's just another one of his Hollywood misfires. 2 stars. The Comedian, folks, it's one of the worst movies I've seen, one of the worst new movies I've seen in a while. This is Robert De Niro plays a stand-up comedian in a movie that isn't funny and doesn't seem to understand what a stand-up comedian is and really doesn't understand what viral video is, because this is a movie where Robert De Niro, as a curmudgeon-y comedian, somehow goes viral like 3 times in the course of the movie that is largely about him hooking up with Leslie Mann, but is also super long. This is a rough movie. I do not recommend it. 1.5 stars. What I will recommend to you, though, is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is the latest release from Marvel Studios. The latest Spider-Man movie. It is somehow the 6th Spider-Man solo film in this millennium, in this young millennium of ours. In 17 or 18 years, they have made 6 Spider-Man movies. And while I don't think this is the best of them, I think it's probably the second best of them. It's a really fun movie. Tom Holland, the kid they have playing Spider-Man, is really good. Michael Keaton plays a really well-rounded and fleshed out villain in The Vulture, who's largely just a dad who's trying to take care of his family, albeit by salvaging alien artifacts and kind of black market selling them. It's a really fun movie. They really get Spider-Man, and they cast a young guy to play Spider-Man. They put Spider-Man in high school, and they have a whole circle of high school friends around him. So it's a movie that really, it just feels like Spider-Man in a way that no other Spider-Man movie to date has. It really gets it. It's a really fun watch with some really exciting set pieces. Could maybe stand to be 10 to 15 minutes shorter, but that's not a big deal. you got to give this one 4 stars. Sandy Wexler is the latest Adam Sandler direct-to-Netflix movie. I consider myself a bit of a Sandler aficionado. I enjoy watching an Adam Sandler movie. I don't know why. There are at most 2 Adam Sandler movies I genuinely like, and the rest of them are largely garbage. Sandy Wexler is what I would call one of Sandler's character comedies, in that he spends the whole movie being a character that kind of is this kind of a guy. That was a little Jerry Lewis-y, but you get the idea. It's, he's not just playing some variation of himself, he's playing a character. And in this case, he is a talentless Hollywood talent agent that we're also supposed to buy is some super legendary. There's a lot of weird stuff in this movie. A lot of it is the sort of usual Sandler weirdness. Of course, he casts an attractive and talented actress, in this case, Jennifer Hudson, to be his love interest, which, especially because he seems to be playing older. With Sandy Wexler, he appears to be playing a character who's older than he is. It creates an age gap that is really unsettling to get behind. It's a movie that is very difficult to root for in any kind of a way. It is a very confusing vanity project in every sense of the word that is fascinating to watch only because I, for some reason, find the workings of Sandler's mind to just be fascinating. Like, why would the choices he makes are so confounding that I cannot look away. But Sandy Wexler is only worth 2 stars. Catch Me If You Can, though, that's a pretty good movie. It's a Spielberg. You got your Tom Hanks. You got your Leonardo DiCaprio. This is not Spielberg's greatest by any stretch of the imagination, nor is it Hanks or DiCaprio's greatest, but it's a solid chase film. It's sort of a movie that, while it has kind of a plot, really is a lot of vignettes as we watch Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who starts out as a high school student and then becomes like a world-traveling con man. We watch him kind of move from one, secret life to another. It's a fun movie. It's a movie that I find myself returning to a lot as, what I called earlier, kind of a folding laundry movie, or I've got a lot of paperwork to do movie. It's a fun movie that is compelling and fun to watch. 3.5 stars. Oh, hello. Let me tell you about what is undoubtedly the finest movie I have watched this year, this century. No, it's not this. Listen, it's no Mad Max Fury Road, but it is up there. This is a movie that I enjoyed quite. What movie am I talking about, you ask? Is it even a movie? These are good questions. I'm talking about Oh, Hello on Broadway, which was recently released to Netflix. It is I guess you would call it a concert film. It is a filming of a performance on Broadway of Oh, Hello, which is a play where comedians Nick Kroll and John Mulaney play 2 old New Yorkers named Gil Faison and George St. Geegland, who these old men have decided to put, who both have theatrical backgrounds, have decided to put on a play, and this is their play. And it is, I don't know, listen, your mileage is going to vary. I think it is hilarious. It is 100% up my alley in every sense of the word. Watching these 2 guys complain and bicker and struggle through finishing this play is everything to me. I watched this movie for the first time like 2 months ago. I've watched it 3 times, which is a lot. I love it every time. My wife and I are saying lines from the movie to each other. If you were at all familiar with these characters, you know that we have become obsessed with pranking somebody with too much tuna. Listen, I cannot begin or end. It is a movie, it is very light on plot. The mileage you're going to get out of it is going to depend on how much you enjoy watching these 2 characters. And for me, the answer is enormously and without end. So please give it a shot. I think it's wholly worth everyone's while. I love it. 5 stars. Sicario is a movie directed by Denis Villeneuve, I think is in the ballpark of how someone might say it. It's the guy who directed Prisoners. I finally watched Prisoners recently. You'll find that review a few episodes back. Loved it, so I thought it's about time I got around to watching Sicario, which I had also been meaning to see. This is a movie where Emily Blunt is a DEA agent who teams up with like Benicio del Toro and a couple other dudes on a big time DEA sting investigation. It did not capture me like Prisoners did. It just didn't. It's a good movie, but like I said, it just didn't grab me. I liked it, but only so much. I found it maybe a little hard to follow. It lacked a character for me to really latch on to. I felt like it lacked the raw emotion of Prisoners. And because of that, I can only really give it 3 stars. The Running Man, this is an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that I had somehow never seen all the way through. This is a one where it's a dystopian future. Arnold Schwarzenegger is convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Part of his sentence is he has to participate in a game show called The Running Man, where he has to fight deadly American gladiator types, played by the likes of Jesse Ventura, and if he wins the game, he gets his freedom. Richard Dawson, in one of his few movie roles, is playing it to the T as the bad guy game show host producer. This is not one of Arnold's finest movies, but it has its moments. It's not terribly well directed is the problem. It feels like a TV movie, and you come to find out that's mainly what the director is known for, is that kind of a thing. With a more visionary director, this could have really been something. As it is, I'm going to give it 2 stars. Can't Buy Me Love. We're sticking around in the 80s with this movie, which features Patrick Dempsey. I don't know why I'm doing this with my arms, but this is a movie that stars Patrick Dempsey. He's McSomething on Grey's Anatomy. And in this movie, he's in high school. And he decides to use the money he has saved over summer to hire a young woman to pretend to be his girlfriend so that he can become popular. But then when he is popular, he forsakes his friends, and he has to learn a lesson. This is a pretty funny movie, and I enjoyed it, but there is no getting around how problematic the central idea of paying a woman to be your girlfriend is. Still, there are some good moments in it. I laughed at some things. I largely liked things that were going on in the background, and particularly the female lead's weird friends. I am going to give this one, let's give it 2.5 stars. Hey, speaking of Patrick Dempsey, we then watched a slightly more recent Patrick Dempsey movie. This is one where he's a playboy type who doesn't realize that he's in love with his best friend until she decides she's going to get married to a Scottish duke. And then she asks Patrick Dempsey to be her maid of honor. This is a pretty lousy movie. There's not a lot, as rom-coms go, there's not a lot to sink your teeth into here in any kind of a way. It is particularly dumb. 2 stars. Speaking of dumb rom-coms that feature Patrick Dempsey, this is a Patrick Dempsey three-peat. And spoiler alert, they get progressively worse. This one is Bridget Jones's Baby. This is the threequel to Bridget Jones's Diary, where Bridget Jones is gonna have a baby, but she is not sure if Colin Firth or Patrick Dempsey, who shows up out of nowhere when they couldn't get Hugh Grant to be in this one, maybe he's the daddy is what I'm getting at. This is a very frustrating movie. It is not fun or funny. It treats the character of Bridget Jones pretty badly. And also, there's a very weird and hard to understand plot where Bridget Jones is now a television news producer. This is another one of those movies that's a very, why? Why would you do these things? I don't know. 1.5 stars. 50 Shades Darker! Listen, I kind of liked 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey is if you're not familiar, these are those movies that are based on those books from a few years back that supposedly all of the ladies were super excited about because they were, naughty, dirty, sexy books. If the books are anything like the movies, they are neither naughty, dirty, or sexy. They are largely just boring and dumb. 50 Shades of Grey, however, was one of those so bad it's good kind of a movies. 50 Shades Darker was even more vanilla somehow, even more frustrating, featured a lot of subplots that didn't go anywhere, like a woman who's stalking them but then mostly just gets talked out of it before anything happens. It is a movie that does not work at all. There's almost some tension near the end, where Christian Grey is in a helicopter accident, but don't worry, he just walks into the room the next scene to say, I'm fine. This is a really dumb movie that is missing the bizarre and goofy charm of the first. 1.5 stars. So there you go. Those are the movies for this week. Once again, I have not managed to see every movie ever, but here's what I am going to tell you. The water here looks pretty nice. I think I'm going to go for a swim. I'll catch you guys next week.